In today's generation of Big Boss and Sprezzola, imagine a show is announced in which a man will be kept in a single room. And in that room, that man, that contestant will have nothing but water. And by nothing, I mean not even clothes. After that, the contestant has to open a lottery and add 10 lakh rupees to finish the game. Only after adding 10 lakh rupees can he leave the show. That contestant will also get food through the lottery. And all the things necessary for survival, all those things, that contestant will have to win through the lottery. This whole concept might seem interesting to you, but no such show will be entertaining. In fact, it will become a live torture, a live stream that can ruin that contestant's life in a very bad way. At the same time, it can also spoil the mental stability of that contestant. This is the story of Nisubi, a man who did a live stream for more than 300 days without clothes for the entertainment of the whole of Japan. The entire nation watched this man struggle for even the smallest things. This show even damaged Nisubi's mental health. By the end of this story, you will feel so bad for Nisubi that you can't even imagine. Because the producers of the show did so many evil things that this whole show can only be called a torture live stream. What is the difference between a comedy and a tragedy? In a comedy, the main character has a flaw, and by the end of the story, that character overcomes the flaw, beats it. But in a tragedy, the same main character discovers his flaw, and by the end, either he magnifies it, makes it worse, or that flaw completely destroys him. The story I'm going to tell you now started on a very light and fun note. It will feel like a comedy. But by the end of this story, you may feel that you haven't heard a more tragic story than this. Nisubi was a stand-up comedian, but his luck wasn't going very well in stand-up comedy. One day, Nisubi was trying for a TV show, and he won the lottery there, which meant that he would now appear on a TV show. In return, that show promised Nisubi fame and success. Nisubi thought he could use that fame and success to boost his career in stand-up comedy. He believed his dream of becoming a very good stand-up comedian would finally be fulfilled. The producers of the show met Nisubi, and they explained all the rules to him. The name of the show was Susunu Denpa Shonen. If translated, it means Life of Prizes. Nisubi had to add a specific amount using sweepstakes in this show. Now, what is sweepstakes? Sweepstakes usually involve small gifts. It's like a lottery. So if someone wins in sweepstakes, they might get a utensil or a football. Such small items are awarded. Nisubi, who was going to win all these items, had the cost of all those items to reach a specific amount, which was 1 million yen. Nisubi was going to get almost everything from sweepstakes, even clothing. Yes, you heard it right. This means that when the show started, Nisubi had to be without clothes, food, entertainment, and everything that was needed for survival. Nisubi had to get it all through sweepstakes. Nisubi had to stay in the same room throughout the show, and he couldn't leave that room until he completed the threshold of 1 million yen. By the way, Nisubi's real name was not Nisubi. Nisubi means eggplant. Now, where did this name come from? This name was given to Nisubi by the producers themselves. Why? Because whenever Nisubi walked around without clothes in the show, the producers censored his crotch with an eggplant icon. The eggplant would move along with him, and so the name Nisubi stuck. Then the day finally came, the day this show began. This whole reality show was nothing but a business, and in this business, they used the innocence of a decent man to make him a laughing stock for the entire country. The makers of the show, instead of doing hard work and coming up with good ideas, abused and exploited Nisubi with evil intentions. In any business, you need to work hard and smart. Only then does that business grow in an ideal way. Now, back to Nisubi. Nisubi was put in a room and told to remove all his clothes, all of them. All of them. What? Really? Isn't that a little extreme? But yes, Nisubi removed his clothes and his journey began, the journey of opening sweepstakes. Nisubi kept opening sweepstakes after that, and what was his first prize? I got it. Yes, I did it. It was fiber jelly. Most people in the world don't even know what fiber jelly is, but it was something to eat. And with this fiber jelly prize, the producers of the show revealed their evil nature. Because when Nisubi entered the show, his very first requirement was clothing. Because any person, all the time, on national TV wouldn't want to live without clothes. Nisubi had put in a request for clothing, specifically for an apron. But when Nisubi finally won something after filling out the sweepstakes, he wasn't given an apron. He was given the first prize, fiber jelly. This proves that the producers of the show didn't want Nisubi to wear clothes. They believed the show wouldn't appeal to the audience if Nisubi wore clothes. After winning fiber jelly, Nisubi kept filing and opening sweepstakes for a long time. But he didn't get any meaningful reward for a long stretch of time. Now imagine yourself in that situation. You're in a room with no source of entertainment. You're not wearing any clothes, and you can't leave the room. At what level would you feel lonely? Because there's no human interaction. There's no source of joy, no one to talk to. And yet, there are cameras in the room, constantly watching you. The whole country is watching you. Can you imagine the pressure in that situation? Can you imagine the depth of that loneliness? I don't know for how many days Nisubi lived with this overwhelming isolation. And because of this loneliness, every time the doorbell rang, Nisubi would get excited. For him, that sound was a glimmer of hope. It was his only source of human interaction. Every time the doorbell rang, Nisubi thought, maybe there's a message from the outside world. Maybe I'll get an update about the game show. Or maybe I've won a new prize. But each time, after hearing the doorbell, Nisubi's heart broke. Why? Because the doorbell wasn't delivering anything meaningful. Sometimes it was a postman asking Nisubi to put a nameplate on his postbox. Other times, it was a food delivery guy who'd recite the entire order, only to say, oh, sorry, I've come to the wrong address. Everything costs 1,700 yen. Sorry, my mistake. These small, meaningless interactions only highlighted the cruelty of the producers. They could have easily managed these situations, but no, they wanted these small shock factors to add drama to the show. Now think about what Nisubi must have been going through. For many days, Nisubi survived only on fiber jelly. But then, after days of despair, Nisubi's luck changed. He won 5 kilos of rice. This was a big win for Nisubi. He was overjoyed when he saw the rice packet, but his happiness didn't last long. Why? Because as soon as he saw the packet, he realized something heartbreaking. He had no way to cook the rice. It was raw rice, and without utensils, Nisubi couldn't cook it. Sure, there was a stove in his room, but no pot or pan, nothing to cook the rice in. Disappointed and hungry, Nisubi began eating the rice raw. But how much raw rice could he eat? It's often said, a hungry man will find a way. And Nisubi proved this saying true in the most incredible way. He came up with an ingenious idea that you can't even imagine. Nisubi took the container from the fiber jelly prize he'd won earlier. He poured water and rice into it. Then carefully, he placed the container next to the flame of the stove. He made sure the container didn't burn, allowing the rice to cook slowly. And this method worked. Finally, after so many days, Nisubi ate something good. For the first time in what felt like forever, he had rice. In the first month alone, Nisubi filed 5,748 sweepstakes. Somewhere in the middle of it all, Nisubi even won a cycle. But the sad thing was that Nisubi couldn't go out with that cycle. What Nisubi did was fix the cycle in the same room in such a way that he could ride it while staying in that confined space. This added some physical activity to Nisubi's lifestyle, which helped keep him sane. Now, Nisubi had a cycle. He had rice. And he had figured out how to cook that rice. After some days, he won a prize, a steak. Nisubi used a ballpoint pen to hang the steak over the stove and cook it. He ate it. That was the first time in a long time that Nisubi had protein in his body, because until then, he had been surviving solely on raw rice for days. When Nisubi was eating that steak, he said something heartbreaking. Before coming to this show, steak was just a word I used in my stand-up comedy. I had never eaten steak. And now, when Nisubi was finally eating steak for the first time in his life, it felt like a luxury to him. But it's so shameful. The first time he got to eat steak, he had to cook it on a ballpoint pen. Such a big luxury of his life, delivered to him in such a pathetic way. After 2 months, after filling out 11,000 to 12,000 sweepstakes, Nisubi finally won his first clothing item. But what was it? That clothing item was a pair of used panties. A pair of used panties belonging to a lady named Hatomi-chan. Imagine filing 11,000 to 12,000 sweepstakes and winning used panties. And the producers of the show were so evil, they ensured that Nisubi couldn't even wear them. The size was too small. They didn't want Nisubi to wear any clothing. Can you see how evil the producers were? And can you imagine how helpless Nisubi must have felt at that moment? When Nisubi realized he couldn't even wear the panties, he went back to wearing nothing. In the upcoming prizes, Nisubi won a small animal soft toy, and now, what I'm going to tell you is incredibly sad. Nisubi started talking to that soft toy. He would talk to it as if it were a real person. Why? Because Nisubi didn't have any human communication. He had no one to talk to. So, he began talking to the small toy. He would take the toy into his room and share his thoughts with it. No human can stay alone for such a long time. It can cause brain damage. And when Nisubi started talking to that toy, started interacting with it, that was the first sign that Nisubi was losing his mind. The next prize Nisubi won was raw pork and raw crab. Now, there's a specific method to cook pork and crab. Specific utensils are required, but Nisubi didn't have any of them. So he couldn't cook the pork or the crab, and that's why he ate them raw. Almost the whole of Japan saw him eating raw pork and raw crab. Nisubi was literally struggling to survive, and this desperate struggle for survival was entertainment for the entire country. The next prize Nisubi won, this one might make you smile, was a PlayStation controller. Yes, Nisubi got a PlayStation controller along with a PlayStation game, but even this turned into a form of torture. Because there was no PlayStation, and there was no TV. So the controller and the game were completely useless. Nisubi then continued filing more sweepstakes, and after 3 months of playing the game, Nisubi won 2 more prizes, a vacuum cleaner and a TV. Nisubi used the vacuum cleaner as much as he could to clean his room. But the TV? The TV didn't have an antenna, so it was also useless. At this point, Nisubi was just collecting random items in his room, none of which could truly improve his life. When the blindfolds were removed, Nisubi was told that he had been shifted to a new location. And do you know what the reason for this was? The reason was that a new place could work as good luck for Nisubi. When the producers of the show came to take Nisubi, you could see how shocked he was. Nisubi's entire brain was filled with fog. His normal, average human skills, his thinking skills, his talking skills had all degraded to a great extent. As soon as he came to the new house, Nisubi made 17,000 sweepstakes. But after that, the game show started to feel very cold. Because of this coldness, the producers of the show decided to shift Nisubi to a new location again. And surprisingly, coming to a new place actually worked out for him. He started winning more prizes and began getting closer to his threshold very quickly. After this, Nisubi won a prize, a VHS player. He was so happy to see it. But then Nisubi realized something heartbreaking. He didn't have any VHS tapes to use it with. So once again, the prize was useless. After a while, however, Nisubi got something huge. He won a PlayStation. Now Nisubi had a PlayStation controller, a game, and a TV. Finally, after 10 months of living without any entertainment, Nisubi had a way to escape his reality. For 10 months, Nisubi had been in this condition. No source of entertainment, no mental escape. And now, he finally had a PlayStation. Because of this, Nisubi played the PlayStation non-stop for 4 days in a row, and it was all being live-streamed. Nisubi was just sitting there playing PlayStation on TV for 4 days straight, and the whole of Japan was watching. This incident made Nisubi the very first video game streamer in the world. Until then, there was no concept of streaming video games. But because of this moment, Nisubi unknowingly became the first person in the entire world to stream gaming. After playing PlayStation for 4 days straight, on the 5th day, Nisubi made a decision. He put a ban on himself. He decided, I will not play PlayStation anymore. Playing PlayStation, then who would file sweepstakes? And how would he get out of the house? He realized this, and he started filing sweepstakes again. Slowly but steadily, Nisubi crossed his 1 million yen threshold. But the producers didn't tell this to Nisubi. Why? Because Nisubi himself didn't have an account, How would he keep track of the 1 million yen he had been collecting for so many months? The producers didn't tell him and tried to run the show for some more time so they could milk Nisubi further. This is literally an evil act. This is truly vile. Finally, one night, the producers came and startled him. They told him, "Yes, you have won." Nisubi was ecstatic. "I won," he said. He recalled, "I was made to sleep 11 months and 1 day ago." The producers took Nisubi to amusement parks, celebrated with him, and showed him different places because he had won 1 million yen. They even showed him all the clips of his journey. But then, amidst all the celebrations, the producers decided to blindfold him again. They took him to another place, and when the blindfold was removed, Nisubi found himself in the same room he had been trapped in for so many months. And then the producers of the show said, "Strip." The producers couldn't bear the fact that the show was over and they couldn't exploit Nisubi any further. So they added a new twist to the game. They announced a new challenge. Now they said Nisubi was in Korea and he had to start over. Nisubi had to file sweepstakes again to earn enough money to buy a flight ticket from Korea to Japan. Do you understand how evil this is? A person who has been opening lotteries just to leave and win a TV show was now forced into another loop. The producers of the show had truly crossed all limits. They knew Nisubi was innocent, a decent person who wouldn't protest. They knew he would keep filing sweepstakes, and they could keep making money off him. They abused Nisubi's innocence to this extent. But this time, their plan backfired. By now, Nisubi had become a pro at filing sweepstakes. His speed had significantly increased. Nisubi worked tirelessly and quickly reached the threshold to buy a flight ticket from Korea to Japan. But the producers didn't stop there. They said, "Nisubi is working so hard. He deserves a business class ticket." So, Nisubi started filing sweepstakes again. He even earned enough money for a business class ticket. But the producers added another challenge, saying Nisubi should get a first class ticket. Nisubi started filing sweepstakes again and, once more, broke the threshold. Finally, Nisubi could fly back to Japan. When he reached Japan, he was blindfolded yet again and taken to a room. When the blindfold was removed, he realized it was the same room. And in that moment, Nisubi stood up and instinctively started taking off his clothes. Why? Because this had become his habit. He was so used to taking off his clothes and filing sweepstakes in a room like this that it became second nature. This had become his life. But as soon as Nisubi took off his clothes and sat down, the walls of the room began to collapse. And Nisubi realized he was sitting in the middle of an auditorium surrounded by thousands of people without any clothes. The crowd started cheering, celebrating his victory. Can you imagine the sensory overload Nisubi must have felt? A person who hadn't spoken to anyone for months, a person who hadn't heard human voices, a person whose interaction with people was zero. A person who hadn't worn clothes for months, and now suddenly you throw him into the middle of thousands of people. How humiliating is that? The producers didn't stop embarrassing Nisubi until the very last moment. This story tells us that if there's an evil businessman, they can exploit the dreams of any decent person without hesitation. They can use someone poor, someone innocent, someone who is focused on one dream. For Nisubi, his dream was simple. I want to become a stand-up comedian. If I go on a reality TV show, I will become famous. I will achieve my dream. But the producers abused that dream. They exploited Nisubi. It's insane. This entire story is heartbreaking. I personally find it deeply upsetting. Just think about it. When Nisubi entered this game show and when he exited, look at his condition before and after. There was an aftermath to this show. When the show ended, it took Nisubi 6 to 7 months to wear clothes again. He couldn't wear clothes because they felt itchy. He had lived without clothes for so many months that even wearing them became unbearable. Nisubi's communication skills, the skills of someone who once wanted to become a stand-up comedian, someone who wanted to perform on stage, were gone. He couldn't talk to anyone. He couldn't focus for long periods. When he met people, he would get sensory overload. He started avoiding everyone. Nisubi was given mental damage at such a severe level, all because the producers wanted to run a show. And when the producers of the show were asked, "Do you have any regrets? Do you feel that you shouldn't have done this?" Their only answer was, "We don't have any regrets." They said, "We just make miracles happen." They said something like this, and they had no regrets. They were not ashamed at all. Millions and millions of people watched this show, that's at a time when there was no TV like we know today. At that time, this show was as popular as Game of Thrones is in the present day. In fact, the number of viewers for this show was even more than the viewers of Game of Thrones. The fame and success that Nisubi was promised after this show, he never got it. Nisubi only got one thing: embarrassment, and just mental